Good afternoon, everyone. I am CommerceNext co-founder Veronica Sansev. Thank you so much for joining us today. So for those that are new, CommerceNext is a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and direct-to-consumer brands. And on behalf of my fellow co-founders, Scott Silverman and Alan Dick, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Our topic is winning customer loyalty beyond holiday sales. So we know Q4 is a big acquisition time for many retailers, and you're acquiring customers who may not have shopped the brand previously. The question that we're going to try to answer today is, how do you keep those new customers long term so that first-time customers become loyal, repeat customers? So you're lucky we have a great group of speakers joining us today. We'll be discussing a number of strategies from personalization to loyalty to customer experience. But before we dig in, I want to walk through a few thank yous and announcements. So first, I want to thank our sponsor, OfferFit. They have been innovating when it comes to AI for personalization and retention, and they've been wonderful partners for this webinar. I also want to thank our speakers, Amanda Bopp, VP North America Marketing at Spade, Stephanie Urban, VP Direct-to-Consumer at Komodo Group, Suruchi Shukla, VP of Marketing at Minted, and George Kachatrian, CEO at OfferFit. We'll be sending our speakers thank you gifts via our gifting partner, Gift Now. This week, we're continuing our drive to grow our social following, but with a focus on Twitter this time. So the first 5 people to follow CommerceNext on Twitter, you'll get a free gift via Gift Now. You'll also notice that we're live tweeting from this webinar, so you can follow along. You can find us on Twitter at CommerceNext. Now, our next webinar is in a month. It's on Wednesday, December 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. It is our Cyber Week recap webinar with Jason Goldberg from Publicis. We've done this for the last 2 years. It is a big, big hit. The presentation will be followed by a panel with Abercrombie & Fitch, Savage X Fenty, Commerce Tools, and Avencia. To register, we put a link in the chat, but you can also go to commercenext.com to learn more. Now, our most recent podcast features Jenna Flateman-Posner. She's the CDO at Snipes. The topic for the podcast is managing the modern retail tech stack and the power of partnerships. You can check it out on commercenext.com or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. It's available everywhere. And since we're talking about holiday for this webinar, we wanted to make sure you were aware that our most recent holiday research report, From Digital Sales Cheer to Consumer Spending Fear, is available. You can download it in the handouts. It offers a helpful outlook for holiday 2022 based on the recent survey of retailers, and it has predictions on the sales growth, margins, promotions, and marketing strategies. It's worth taking a look, and you can download it easily. And then finally, registration is open for the CommerceNext e-commerce growth show on June 20th and 21st. Scaled retailers and brands usually qualify for a free or discounted pass. Plus, we're offering some special early registration benefits to the first 100 retailers that sign up. We have 2 benefits: Fast Pass registration, which is expedited check-in, and we're offering a 2-for-1 ticket, which is, if you get a ticket, qualify for a free pass. You can invite a colleague to join you. We have about 30 spots left in that program, so make sure you grab them before they're gone. Now, if you missed any of our past events, whether it be a webinar or any of the sessions at the summit, you can find them on YouTube/CommerceNext. There's a lot of content there, everything from strategic keynotes to tactical how-to breakout sessions. Just make sure to follow so you get updates whenever we have a new video. So, if you haven't joined us before, just a few quick overview of where things are and how things work. Don't worry if you miss anything. We are recording this webinar. We usually have it available by the next day, so by tomorrow. I'm going to quickly show you where everything is on the screen, and then we'll jump in. So first of all, there's a panel on the right-hand side. This is the main panel for interactivity. There is chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts in that panel. Now, chat is where you can interact with other audience members, give our speakers high fives. My colleague Maeve will be in there moderating. You can say hello to Maeve. But if you have a question, we ask you to enter that question under the Q&A tab. So to do that, you hit Q&A and then you enter the question on the bottom. And then once the question is published, you have the ability to upvote the question. This is really important because it helps me determine the most important questions that I should be asking the panelists. So even if you don't ask a question, go in there every now and then, upvote the questions that are there so we can make sure we're asking the most important questions before we run out of time. And then finally, the last tab is the handouts. There you'll see the slides from today, as well as our holiday research report. And of course, for anyone who is watching the replay, that link to the handouts is actually at the bottom of your player. So our agenda for today, we're going to have a presentation on winning customer loyalty beyond holiday sales by George Kachatrian, CEO of OfferFit. Then we're going to have audience polls where we get to ask you questions. And then we have a panel discussion with Kate Spade, Komodo Group, and Minted. So with that, it is with great pleasure that I turn this over to George. George,
hi everyone. No, thanks, Veronica. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So let's talk about winning customer loyalty beyond holiday sales, because of course it's one thing to get the first purchase, but then how can you continue getting repurchase after that huge influx of new customers that happens during the holidays? And Veronica, can you hear me okay? And is everything showing up fine? Okay, great. So the good news is that there is, of course, a huge splash of customers that are coming in the holidays. And this time, 63% of retailers expect to beat their prior year performance. So it's going to be a big year by all accounts. That's the good news. The possibly more difficult news is that there are certain macroeconomic pressures that are going to squeeze margins. First of all, inflation. 8.2% is the inflation rate for the 12 months ending September 2022, which of course exerts significant margin pressures on retailers. And then second of all, returns have been growing. So for example, 2021 returns already exceeded 2020 returns, and it's very possible that there's going to be similar dynamics this year. And so taken together, it looks like conditions are great for top line performance, but it's actually potentially very tricky for retailers because that bottom line is getting squeezed. And figuring out how to have a very successful holiday season while still getting profitable customers is a challenge. And that's why that retention piece is so important too, because there may be certain customers that come in during the holidays. It's going to be hard to get good margins on those customers right away, but makes a huge impact if you can get long customer lifetime value, of course, by retaining those customers for the long term. And so a lot of these dynamics are why so many retailers are continuing to focus on personalization. And so what are the ways that personalization plays into margin pressure? And how are some retailers that at least I've been speaking to handling and thinking about this? The first thing is promotions. So blanket promotions can be very effective for driving the top line, but of course can be very, very damaging to margins. On the other hand, if you say no promotions, there's a lot of customers you might lose. And so trying to be targeted and saying, hey, instead of blanket promotions, who are those customers that need a promotion in order to convert versus the customers that will convert anyways, and also calibrating the size of the promotion to the needs of that particular customer is the first way. The second way has to do with paid ad campaigns. So if you look at, in particular, retargeting campaigns, so campaigns to known customers that have shopped before, that's an example where it's really hard to measure incrementality. But if you set up the right systems, retailers who are being very sophisticated about this can actually detect who are the customers that you should be including in those campaigns versus if they're your past customers, how you can continue securing their loyalty without having to spend on those campaigns just through using own channels, such as email. So as you can imagine, huge ROAS value in personalizing which customers to even include in retargeting campaigns, and if yes, which campaigns to include them in. And then finally, personalizing product suggestions, and not just on a superficial level of, hey, this product is like things you looked at before, but actually in a way that's aware of margins associated to those SKUs, so that ultimately what you're maximizing is is the margin performance, not just the likelihood of that customer viewing or purchasing some product. And so these are the main dimensions along which we've been seeing retailers personalize in order to try to mitigate some of that margin pressure. And so in this session, we'll share 7 tips on how to do it effectively. So the first tip is the foundation for any personalization when you're talking about your existing known customers is unified data. And this is an area where we've seen just tremendous growth in the industry in terms of how sophisticated companies have been. 10 years ago, it was very rare for companies to unify their data across different silos. And it's increasingly becoming the norm that companies have well set up data warehouses and or customer data platforms where they've actually bring together their customer data, and you have that 360, as it's called, view of the customer. So that's the foundation. And for companies that don't have this yet, before they can really meaningfully work on personalization, this is the bedrock on which it needs to sit. The second thing, counterintuitively, not all personalization is good. So personalization is such a buzzy word, and everyone says personalization, it must be great. Interestingly, oftentimes it is, but just doing things differently for different customers sometimes can be counterproductive. Perhaps my favorite example is there was a company that actually using OfferFit tested including people's name in the subject line of an email. So the email could say, like to me, it would say, George, check out what we have for you in this email. And they found through experimentation, this actually performed worse than subject lines that didn't have the recipient's name. And we don't know exactly why, but probably it's because having that name in the subject line makes it seem spammy. So if people see that, because normal people don't put their other people's names in their subject lines of their emails, so it must be a robot that did this, and then that's actually spam. Whereas emojis actually in that example ended up performing better in the subject line and managed to get people's attention. So personalization is not always good, and what that means is personalization by itself is not actually sufficient. You need to always be thinking of personalization in the same context as experimentation, right? Because personalization is only good if it's driving an improvement in the business KPIs that matter the most. And that's why, to me, personalization and experimentation really need to be two sides of the same coin in order for this to be something that drives business value, as opposed to just being something that, doing personalization for the sake of saying we're personalizing. So experimentation, and when I say that, what I mean is doing things like A/B tests or other ways of trying things out and finding out what's going to maximize the right metric. And so this is tip number 4. Picking that metric is actually really crucial. And the obvious example is things like email clicks. It's an easy thing to track, but maximizing clicks doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be driving business outcomes. In fact, it's easy to then send a bunch of clickbaity emails. It's not hard to find examples where that doesn't actually work in terms of driving business performance. But another example is revenue, which is a very frequent thing to maximize. But given the margin pressure that we're seeing, revenue by itself is actually also like only a so-so proxy. It's better than clicks for sure. But ideally, you want to be maximizing some kind of profitability metric, contribution margin, and so forth. And in a lot of companies, that's something that the CFO is very attuned to, but sometimes folks in other parts of the business less so. But we've seen incredible things happen in businesses when people really align that across the board and say, hey, as a marketing organization, when a marketing org says they're going to align the KPIs with the finance organization and the KPIs that they measure the performance of their campaigns on, and that they do that experimentation, personalization to maximize are those margin indicators, it can really strengthen the ability of that team to build support and alignment throughout the company, because they're ultimately driving those metrics that company is valued on. The next thing is, as you think about personalization, everyone knows about email subject lines. And that was the example I gave. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the things you can play with and use to optimize your campaigns. So for example, one that very few companies play with, but it's an incredibly powerful lever, is frequency. Which customers should you be communicating with, whether by email, text message, in-app push notification, or ads? Once a week, once a day, once every 2 or 3 weeks? Most companies just have some set policy, and that's what they do for everybody. But that's really missing the opportunity to detect the customers that want more frequent communications and actually provide those to them, as well as customers where if you over communicate, they'll just tune out and then be more sparing in how you communicate with those. Other examples of really powerful levers are time of day, day of the week, channel, in cases when you have different channels that are available, as well as, of course, the actual products you're talking about and the terms of any promotions that you offer. So there's this huge range of things that can be personalized and optimized, and you get incremental lift from each of those things. So if you're running a very sophisticated experimentation program and optimizing across all those dimensions, you end up seeing just much stronger performance than if you pick just one or two things and optimize those. The next thing is just how labor intensive it is to run experimentation personalization. And there's two approaches. You could either have a huge team that's working on this, and some very large companies do, or you can have automations that allow you to, instead of doing this experimentation manually, run machine learning models that actually are a type of machine learning called reinforcement learning, which automates the process of experimentation. And the way I've seen a lot of marketers express this is A/B testing is extremely hard to scale. The more different dimensions you're testing on, the more you're trying to use experimentation to personalize and go to segments and then microsegments and beyond, the more labor intensive it is to run these A/B tests. And so that's why either the automation or being prepared to have potentially over 100 people in the experimentation org, that's kind of the trade-off that companies need to decide on. Which leads to this point, which is if you aren't able to have 100 people, or even like some of the companies we work with do have 100 data scientists working on experimentation, they still find that that's not enough to do all of the experimentation they need. Machine learning's finally matured to the point where doing one-to-one personalization in a completely automated way is possible. And the particular type of machine learning that does this is called reinforcement learning. It's been mostly something that's academic until the last couple of years, really. But now these reinforcement learning models have reached maturity in terms of the research, and they're entering industrial applications in things like marketing being a prime example. So one of the major things that allows is moving beyond just personalizing at the segment level, saying for this really huge category of customers that we call a segment, we're going to do the same thing, and saying for each customer, based on 200 dimensions of things we know about them, what is the best thing to be doing? That's actually no longer fantasy, that's actually reality today. So as you think about this transition that marketers are making, going from manual A/B testing to continuous automated experimentation with reinforcement learning, how does that transition look? So with manual experimentation, you can only test one dimension at a time. With continuous automated experimentation, you can actually test multiple dimensions, frequency, time, subject line, offer, at the same time, because these models are able to think in many dimensions. With manual testing, you use manually defined segments to personalize. With these new machine learning models, you can personalize one-to-one using all of the available customer data. With manual A/B testing, you apply your findings after you finish testing. So there's this division between test and apply. But with these always-on models, it's more of every single recommendation is both part of a test as well as trying to optimize the resulting outcome. So it's erasing this distinction between testing and applying. It all becomes intermingled in a single continuous process. And finally, with manual A/B testing, you have to retest every time things shift. Of course, the COVID pandemic was a great example where customer behaviors were constantly shifting as the pandemic and society's reaction to it changed over the course of 2 years. And so having to retest whenever something shifts customer behavior, or more recently, the inflation that we're seeing, is extremely laborious. With continuous experimentation, that's not needed because the models just pick this up as they go. So yeah, in terms of the use cases that we see customers use for automated experimentations, things like repurchase, cross-sell, win-back, referral, upsell, renewal, and loyalty use cases. And so I know there are some questions now that folks have been chatting. Veronica, should I proceed to answer some of those?
Yep, I'm jumping in here with you. Yeah, I think these questions are actually for you. So why don't we quickly answer those and then we'll jump into the poll. So the first question is from Tracy. She's asking if it still makes sense to ask customers how often they wish to hear from us or whether we should just rely on metrics. So I guess, George, from your perspective, is asking the question redundant at this point?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it never hurts to ask the question. I think the challenge is getting customers to actually respond when you ask them. So I think you might be able to get a certain percentage of customers to say, "Hey, here's how frequently I want to hear from you." But I think what most of our clients find is 90% of folks in B2C contexts aren't going to take the time even to respond to that type of survey, and so that's why you just have to infer based on their behavior. If they're tuning out, then that probably means it's too frequent, and empirically discover that for most of them.
Awesome. And then Ramona B, and I'm going to just use the first initial of the last name just so I don't butcher it here, but she's asking, what are best practices for determining frequency?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The trade-off with frequency usually is if you communicate with people more frequently, you're going to drive increased financial performance, but then you're also going to drive more unsubscribes. So the best practice is to set up a model that penalizes for unsubscribes, and with a penalty value that's correctly financially calibrated. And then make sure you have a wide range of choices for the model to choose from, to where it can have like high frequency, like once a day or twice a day, as well as very low frequency. And that way the model can actually discover what's better, because it'll penalize and stop doing the things that are so frequent that they're driving disproportionately many unsubscribes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to switch gears. We're going to do a couple of audience polls. And then, George, I'm going to bring you back on with the other panelists for the panel portion of the webinar. Okay. So we have a couple of questions for you guys in the audience. Just as a reminder, if once the polls launch, you can go to polls closed, and then you'll see the specific results. So our first question is, which retention and loyalty strategies are you currently implementing? And you can select all that apply. Loyalty programs, personalization, and here it can include the personalization of the offer, the products shown, the frequency of communication, the channel of communication or multi-channel communication, so email, SMS, chat, what other channels you may use, targeted promotion, so are you doing anything to drive that second purchase? Then CRM retargeting. And then the last one is other. And in that case, you can specify in the chat. So since you guys could select more than one, I'll kind of go through the top answers. So the top answer was targeted promotions to drive that second purchase. And that makes a lot of sense, as the data proves that second purchase is a really good predictor for customer lifetime value. But then the next two that were equally as popular were multi-channel communication and CRM retargeting, and personalization was just a hair below that. So it looks like folks are trying a lot of different things to drive loyalty and retention. I'm now going to move to the second question. What is your prediction for retention this holiday season? And this is as compared to 2021. Better? Do you expect retention to be better this holiday season, the same as 2021, or worse? So pretty simple question here. What is your prediction for retention this holiday season? Better, the same as 2021, or worse? Oh, interesting. Okay, so the majority of people are expecting retention this holiday season to be worse. The second most popular answer was better, and then the remaining folks were the same. So, I think that also is probably consistent with the fact that maybe e-com is retreating slightly as people are going back to in-store, but it's interesting to see this. The last question, which I think you guys have already answered, is relating to the Cyber Week recap webinar. So how do you expect holiday 2022 to compare to plan? Do you expect it to be much ahead of plan, slightly ahead of plan, at plan, slightly below plan, or much below plan? So I'm actually curious how this compares to the holiday survey that we did, which was now about a month ago. So how do you expect holiday 2022 to compare to plan? Much ahead, slightly ahead, at plan, slightly below, or much below? Well, the overwhelming majority, 63% of you, believe that it's going to be slightly below plan. So that is a pretty clear indicator. There's a few people who think it'll be at plan or slightly ahead of plan, but I think the majority of people see a slight dip this holiday season. All right, great. Thank you for answering those questions. We'll now move into the panel portion of our discussion. Hello, thank you all for jumping in and joining us for the panel portion discussion. George, thank you for teeing us up with a presentation to kind of give us some context. To start things off, Amanda, Stephanie, and Saruchi, would you mind just introducing yourselves and your role in your companies, and maybe just go according to the screen? So Saruchi, then Stephanie, and then Amanda.
Sure. Happy to. Hi, everybody. Saruchi Shukla. I oversee all marketing at Minted. And I've been at Minted about 6 months. And prior to this, ran marketing for tailored brands. And before that, ran e-commerce and digital marketing teams at some of the tech giants like Google, Nest, and Apple. And no matter which industry I've been in, this question of how to get retention right, especially over holidays and beyond, that has stayed consistent. So I'm super excited to be part of this conversation today with all of you.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Urban. I'm the Vice President of Direct-to-Consumer for Camuto Group, and I'm running the business for vincecamuto.com, so everything in relation to e-com and digital marketing, as well as social and influencers. So happy to be here and chat through everything retention.
Wonderful. Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bopp. I am Vice President of North America at Spade, and I look after full funnel marketing in the physical world as well as the digital world. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're thrilled you guys could be here. Let's start this conversation by just taking a look at what we're doing from a marketing perspective for holiday 2022. And Saruchi, I'll start with you. Talk about how your marketing strategies have changed this year compared to last year. Like at a high level, what is your channel mix, your promotional strategy, as your creative changed? Do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, happy to, Veronica. So I would say, it's less about a wholesale shift in our marketing strategy, but more about, how are we looking at reactivating some of our channels that we had moved away from possibly. Every marketer, I think, knows acquiring customers is getting more and more expensive, both because just our economic conditions plus some of the tech changes that have been going around us. But honestly, when I see our customers, even people who used to be loyal customers for us, their buying behavior shifted over the pandemic. So for us, it's important to go back and get back to top of mind, even for our loyal customers. So what we are working on is how do we get our market share back by really making sure our SEM brand is right, making sure our influencers are back in the market and talking to our Gen Z consumers. Our TV, it's important to actually still be on TV because that awareness and market share piece is still important. We are getting smarter in our TV strategy. We went from just being in linear TV to now going, of course, heavy programmatic and streaming, because that's where our audience has moved to. But I would say the biggest change that we brought in at Minted is we used to be a very CPA-driven marketer. It used to be all about new customer acquisition. How do we make sure we find the right customer for us? And we've now become more a ROAS-driven and an LTV-driven marketer, which really is talking about let's make sure people who at least know us are the ones we're talking to, and they are the ones we are bringing back into the fold. So it's similar type of channels, but how we are optimizing and who we are optimizing for is different.
Got it. Yeah. Awesome. And it's interesting that you're focusing on reacquiring customers that may have shopped the brand before, as opposed to acquiring new customers. Amanda, Stephanie, anything different on your side?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, we are also ROAS driven, and then this whole retention side of things, we're focused on increasing LTV over time. But I think for us, the last year has really just been continuing to diversify outside of Meta. So we are also more heavily investing in influencer, CTV, and then even TikTok, and now Snapchat AI. So just really kind of showing up in a different way on different channels, and also having to create the content engine behind those new channels. So lots of fun things going on, but trying to see what works.
Yeah. Amanda, anything to add to that? If not, we'll talk about retention.
No, pretty consistent.
So we asked the audience a few questions about what they're using for retention, as well as how they think retention will compare to last year. I want to ask you the inverse of that question. I'm going to start with you, Amanda, but I would love to get everyone's perspective on this. Kind of using your best guess, what % of holiday shoppers do you think are first-time shoppers for your brand?
Yeah, so I would say just a couple things to level set here, that our primary category is handbags, which is a longer consideration, longer life cycle category. So the majority of our customers are new to begin with. So new customers are they're a critical fuel for our business. At this time of year, when you've got not only the mechanics of the category in place, but of course you've got heavy gifting, we will see well over 80% of our customers who are coming in will be new. And that's a really exciting thing for us, because it means it's an opportunity for us to welcome new customers into our brand. At Kate Spade, we like to say we welcome with warmth. So it gives us the opportunity to do that really, really well. And then to think about post-holiday, how we develop relationships with these customers.
Awesome. Stephanie, how about you?
Yes, we won't see as high as 80%. That's so high, but very exciting for a brand to see numbers that big, but more than our usual, of course. And what we try to do is really capitalize on those new visits during that time frame. So developing, new capture opportunities for email and SMS when she lands on the site, and making sure that we're drawing those new customers into that communication stream, and then giving her something meaningful when she actually does sign up.
Awesome. And Suruchi, you mentioned your focus on return customers. What would you say roughly %?
Yeah, and so unlike either Kate Spade or Camuto, and unlike I think most retailers, our Q4 business tends to be a heavy return customer business, and it's not a surprise, because think about the business we are in. We're selling holiday cards. So somebody who starts their journey with Minted gets their their address book created with us, and it takes an effort, right, to get it built over the years. So it's the stickiness of it, and then Minted also offers free recipient addressing, so we'll take it and print it for you. So it just stays with you, and it takes a lot of effort for people to move away from that. So as a result, what we do end up focusing on is making sure our promo strategy doesn't really shift year over year, right? We are making sure, yes, there are promos out there that are incentivizing new customers to come see us, but not at the cost of our return customers. So, we kind of stay, our prices tend to be, we're pretty transparent about our pricing. Our products are very premium. And so we tend to not go 60, 70% discounting type of strategy. It's more about, you are a loyal customer. This is our max offer that you will always expect from us. So that's, that is kind of what we are going after. And our focus ends up being more about building that relationship with the customer, really getting to know you. Are you promo sensitive? Do you like one-on-one interactions with our customer support teams? Do you like to do traditional designs versus modern designs? All of those things. And that helps us get into that more personalized experience with our return customers.
Awesome. And so, Suruchi, you just kind of touched on some of the things that you collect as part of that customer onboarding process that you use. Stephanie and Amanda, is having more new customers. How much information do you collect on that first purchase? What information are you gathering about the customers that you can use to retain them long term?
Do you want
Stephanie,
Oh, you can go.
Oh, sorry. So I was just going to say that, getting as much data as possible on that first transaction, again, especially for a business that has a long-term consideration set to purchase, is really important. So we're already capturing the transactional details, but we try to get as much information as we can in terms of ability to contact, how the customer likes to be contacted, as well as any other first-party data that we can collect if it is a digital purchase, and we can understand what that web journey was like. So literally as much as we can. We do a slightly better job of it in stores, because we've got the ability to have our sales associates and stylists interact with the customer, and we're able to get a bit more dimensionality on her. But truthfully, as much as we can, we'll take, so that we can start that retention journey.
Awesome. Stephanie, how about you? Is there anything else that you're collecting from customers?
No, just beyond everything that Amanda said, and then just, of course, whatever behavior we can capture on site as well within our CDP to leverage in the future for, personalization.
Yeah, of course. On-site behavior is always, it's in the cookieless world. It's harder unless they're logged in, or they've logged in within the same kind of session. But a lot of good signals there. Mm-hmm. George, what are you seeing with your customers? Is there anything else that's really relevant, or are you finding it's all about the testing that the signals come through?
Yeah, we found, first of all, it varies tremendously from company to company what in the data is going to have the most valuable signal. Of course, with cases where it's like repeat purchases, the past purchases, what if people bought, which product categories were there in, different attributes of those categories is almost always very, very predictive. But then you sometimes find surprising things. Like one of our customers, it turned out that the particular channel that customers had originally converted through predicted whether they needed early morning emails or not. People who converted through one particular channel, like 7 a.m. was like the perfect time for that particular group of people. And so you often find it's very surprising. So we typically, like when a company sets up OfferFit, we work with them to include 200 different characteristics of customers based on like a brainstorming with them, because you don't know, and there's almost always going to be some surprises of which of those turn into signals.
So interesting. Very interesting. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about, what we're doing to retain customers. Obviously, personalization plays a significant role in retention and loyalty, which is why we're talking about it on this call. Stephanie, talk about, what you guys are doing from personalization. I also know that there's some things that you have in the works. So talk about whatever you could talk about today, and then.
Definitely. So I think one of the things my team did actually earlier this year before holiday chaos started was take a step back and build a customer journey and just have a big conversation around that with all channels at the table. So thinking about what are those touch points that we have with her before, during, and after her purchase path, and what are the things that we can quickly clean up, and then what are the other areas of opportunities for quick wins to layer in there. So that really helped kind of set a foundation for the roadmaps leading into holiday that I feel like made a good impact and drove strategy. But I think the most exciting thing we're doing right now is we just launched with the CDP. And so that's slowly or quickly, I guess, in the background, building out, AI-based predictive segments and cohorts and category affinity segments that we have not had previously. And so we're building out the strategy to ramp that up significantly and leverage it as part of our post-purchase messaging as soon as we get out of peak holiday. So exciting to have that type of data at our fingers.
And you mentioned segments. And maybe this is too early to ask this question, so definitely let me know if that's the case. Mm-hmm. But like, what aspects do you are you starting to personalize, or do you plan to personalize? Is it the products, the offers, the timing, all the above?
I think it's going to be a little bit of all the above, but we do try to prioritize based on what we think will have the most revenue impact. So I do think some of the larger category affinity cohorts are where we're going to start, because it's not all automated for us yet. And I think George made a lot of good points about how much work that takes when you don't have it automated. I think we're going to start with some big rocks, which is category based, and see how we can move the needle with those. And then I think also based on where she is in her purchase path with us. So is she high intent, or has she churned, and creating some triggered strategies based off of that.
Awesome. Amanda, I want to ask you a little bit about tools, but beforehand, is there anything kind of in addition to what Stephanie mentioned in terms of your personalization strategy?
I mean, we have a lot of the same things going on. I will say, because we are part of Tapestry, our parent company has put in place a lot of marketing technology and has brought on a lot of different vendor partners to help us with personalization. So we've had a CDP in place for a couple of years, and we are constantly, trying to augment the data that's in there, as well as leverage data science to make that data more actionable, which informs segmentation, which informs a lot of predictions around things like price sensitivity, or as Stephanie said, category affinity. And then we've got a couple of different partners. One of them, Veronica, I know you're familiar with, Persado, who leverages machine learning and AI really to better predict the types of language and the sentiment that consumers are most likely to respond to. So that's been a really helpful tool for us, and it's helped us really not just understand from a tactical perspective what to say to who, but what are the right emotions that we really need to tap into, and sentiments in order to really connect with customers.
Awesome. And George, I have a question for you. I want to kind of hear what your customers are doing, and anything you would add to what Amanda kind of and Stephanie already shared, but there's also an audience question I'm going to direct to you as a follow-up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like the patterns that came through with Stephanie, Amanda, what you shared, setting up CDPs, obviously a huge thing that sophisticated brands have been doing, and for providers like OfferFit makes all the difference if a company has a CDP, because it enables much easier and more fluid work for any kind of machine learning models that company is then going to set up. So that's been a huge pattern. And another thing that we're seeing is more and more companies are actually getting serious about machine learning, because like AI, for example, it's been buzzy for decades now, and so every company like talks a lot about AI, but there's this distinction between saying like, hey, like we tick the box, we do something that like we can say is AI, versus we're seeing more and more companies get really like brass tacks. Be like, okay, if we're using machine learning, what's the way that that's actually going to drive business value? What's the business need we're using it for? And using it in very practical ways, which to me is very exciting to see that be an increasing trend.
Yeah, and actually, so the question that Vahag had is kind of related. Vahag Karian asked, how important is your messaging and incentive timing when it comes to retention? And I don't know. I think George, maybe can you answer that question?
Yeah, like how important is timing?
Timing of the incentive and the specific messaging for a repeat customer.
Yeah, I mean, timing can be super important. Again, depends vastly on industry. Like one of our customers is a video game company. It turned out that at what point in gameplay you reach out with a monetization offer is actually super important. In general, after you've won the last game instead of after you've lost, turns out to be very important. But then there's further than like personalization effects beyond that. Also things like day of the week, right? There are some times that are like, even if you're emailing on a weekend, you should be emailing later in the morning. Is a thing that I guess sounds obvious when you hear it, but was interesting to see models pick up on that sort of subtlety. So in general, timing is a pretty important lever from what we see.
And if I could just jump in on that, I think another thing that we've seen from a timing perspective is, we have really a very finite window of time in terms of capturing a customer and getting her to make a second purchase. It's about a 6-month time period. If she hasn't made that second purchase within 6 months, the odds of her ever coming back are quite slim. And we see this interesting kind of bookend of where within her first kind of like 30 days, she's actually most likely to come back and make a second purchase. And then she kind of cools off, and then she'll be back around again around month 5. So understanding that natural kind of shopping pattern really helps us to best understand what are the key moments that we need to be having dialogue with the customer in order to make sure that we are retaining her.
And Amanda, if you know that it has to be in the 6-month period, is your strategy then to kind of accelerate promotions, okay.
Yeah, we basically, it's like the clock starts ticking, and then we need to make sure that we are, as I said earlier, welcoming her with warmth. How are we onboarding her to the brand? How are we giving her appropriate product recommendations? How are we making sure that she's aware of our best offers, or things that would be relevant and appropriate for her, or him, I should say.
Yeah, awesome. Of course. Lots of people can have handbags.
Mm-hmm.
I want to switch gears for a second and talk about loyalty programs. Suruchi, both you and Stephanie have loyalty programs with your brands. Talk about how you introduce them to customers and also how they've helped your retention efforts. Maybe Suruchi, you can start first, and also talk about your loyalty program, because they're different. You have a different strategy between the two of you.
Yeah, it's definitely, ours is more a subscription type of a loyalty program. It's called Minted More. It's actually quite popular with our customers. You pay a nominal fee of $38 to join it. It's an annual $38 fee. And you not only enjoy deeper discounts, because again, what I talked about, Minted doesn't necessarily go discounting too deeply. But if you are a Minted More customer, you get deeper discounts year round, especially on products that never get discounted. But then along with that, it also, you are also sent a specially made box, which comes in with many minted goodies. And the box itself is almost like $160 worth. So the ROI on this one is pretty clear. And Q4 tends to be the quarter where we see a huge number of subscribers coming into it. So talking about timing, as we are selling Minted More to them, it's all about you can actually save 30% on your holiday cards, which is like the deepest discount that we will put out there. So we get a lot of subscribers and of course a lot of redemptions as a result of it during Q4. And what we found is, besides just talking about it in email, as we have layered in SMS journey, the subscriptions just have started to skyrocket because that feels a lot more personalized to folks. And talking about, again, timing, we generally tend to hit people once they start a process. For example, if any of you have been building your holiday cards, you start the process, but then you wait for your pictures. So the personalization piece of it takes a little bit of time. And if that's when we hit you with that offer, we tend to get you a little bit faster. The other thing is a direct mail campaign for sending our loyalty offers right at this time actually performs really well for us. And the new thing we're trying is getting our influencers to start talking about it. So it's a promotional message, but talking about it through a loyalty lens, which has been really helpful for us.
Awesome. So it sounds like timing is very, very key for your loyalty program. That's awesome. Stephanie, how about you? What do you see?
Yeah.
And first, explain the difference in your program, because yours is not a paid one, right?
Yes, that's correct. So our program is called VC VIP. So it's just, we're basically getting more first-party data from you to sign up. But then you get all of the great perks of being in the program. So it's points-based and then cashback rewards. And then we also do, fun things throughout the year, including a month that's really dedicated just to providing special incentives for this group. And then we try to do gated previews of new arrivals, gated preview days of the offers, including Cyber Week. And we also use that as an acquisition play. So a week prior to Cyber Week, we'll be sending an email out to all of our non-loyalty members just saying like, hey, sign up for VIP and you're going to get to shop first. So layering in those acquisition moments and then, delivering on giving them something that's actually exclusive to them to keep them coming back, because they are still actually a pretty small piece of our list. However, on the days that we're driving these loyalty promotions, and even if it's just double points, they drive a majority of our traffic and they're spending significantly more than our non-loyalty members. So we know the CTV is there, or sorry, CLV is there. And so just that's kind of it's now a 3-pronged acquisition play for us, where it's email, then SMS, and then loyalty from a hierarchy standpoint.
Oh, awesome. So that's like literally, you want to get the email capture, you want to get the phone number, and then you're trying to get them in the loyalty program. And I love that it's not all about discounts, that some of it is tied to like access, so that customers have kind of multiple dimensions that they can engage with the brand. Interesting. We're getting a lot of audience questions, so I'm going to incorporate some of them into our discussion. There is one from Stephen Bradbury with regard to gift card. So I guess NRF reported that gift card's the most requested gift for holiday. I'm guessing holiday 2022. And I'm assuming that all of you, maybe I don't know about Saruchi, but actually I'm assuming that Stephanie and Amanda, like your brands sell gift cards. What are the steps you're using to promote gift cards, but also when you capture that gift card buyer, how are you converting them into and ultimately retaining them as a loyal customer, since they are essentially buying a credit card from you?
I can chime in. So we actually do run some gift card promotions during holiday that we don't run otherwise. So it's kind of like a gift for you, gift for them situation, so that they feel like they're getting a little bit of something to come back and shop with us. And that's been successful. And we also have our on-site gift guide, which helps reiterate that gifting message outside of all the other touch points that we developed to kind of circle in through holiday. And of course, as soon as the shipping cutoff is over, it's all about the gift cards.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say similarly, I think we give our gift cards more attention this time of year than we probably do throughout the rest of the year. I think the gift card promos are interesting. We haven't tested any of those since I've been here, but certainly something that we can take a look into around potentially like Valentine's Day to get a sense of it for Mother's Day. We do, every time we talk about gift cards, we always have this moment of being like, okay, but there's really two end customers here. There's the gift giver and the gift receiver. And so we're constantly trying to think about how we can create a more delightful experience for both. And to your point, really make sure that we are rewarding and retaining those customers who are effectively buying credit from us.
Yes, awesome. And that is the trickiest thing. I like how Stephanie has it. It's like a gift for you, a gift for them. So it gives you a little bit of both get it rewarded. I want to talk about promotions, and as part of that, I'm going to weave in one of the audience questions as a follow-up. But how do promotions play into your retention strategies? I know, Amanda, you talked about that accelerated timing of getting that second purchase, but what promotion strategies have you used to drive repeat purchases?
Yeah, so first I would say that, like promotions are definitely a driver of purchase frequency. There's no question about that. I think we use promotions in a couple of different ways. One really broadly, just as a lever, right, to drive the top line of the business. But then we use them with very specific customer cohorts that we think have the ability to make a second purchase, or more importantly, that we believe could move into another category. We've seen consistently that customers who move into categories like footwear or ready to wear or our home and living products over time develop a much higher lifetime value and have a higher propensity to come back and make third, fourth, fifth purchases. So a lot of the way that we like to think about promotions or any other tool in our toolbox is how do we take the customer who is buying our handbags, which we're super happy about, but really invite her into our entire lifestyle and move her into those more replenishment conducive categories.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. So Ruchi, Stephanie, anything you want to add to kind of that promotional strategy to get that second purchase?
I think it's very similar because we exist in multiple categories. So we try to think about people's life stages and how do we bring them in and offer them the right offers that will be resonating with the life stage that they're in. And then, so it's very much about cross-sell. What we found a lot of success with is, as we get transactional with them, so if it's the transactional emails or it's inbox inserts, it's like those kind of things have started to resonate really well when it talks about this is the next offer because you just purchased this, and we believe this is the next right product for you based on what we know about you. So those are the things that I think it's very similar to what Amanda is saying.
Yeah, journey-based.
Journey-based, life stage-based.
Now, George, you specifically mentioned one-to-one personalization towards the end of your presentation. Talk about that. Is that like, how hard is that to achieve? And what do you see in terms of the benefits of one-to-one personalization of the offers? And
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to promotions, the biggest promotion mistake we see is a lot of companies just over discount through blanket promotions, where they'll put up just very deep promotions, including in contexts where it would actually be very possible to personalize them with technologies that are available these days. One example, there was a company that we worked with where initially it's a subscription business, and to get people to renew, they were giving them $3 off their monthly rate just as the default, and sometimes it was $5 off. So you can imagine very, very margin erosive. And as they started running the experimentation with OfferFit, they actually found that for most of their customers, purely saying lock your rate, we will not raise it, that was actually the best thing in terms of lifetime value for the majority of their customers. And then that gave the marketers ideas, and they're like, well, why don't we put in a rate increase? Click here to increase your rate by only $2 and then lock it in for a few years. And it turns out there's a significant plurality of customers where that's like the best thing. So developing more sophisticated ways of, as Amanda, as you put it, targeting and saying, hey, if you're sending any kind of discounts, knowing who are those customers, whether in cohorts or one-to-one, but in some way that really need those discounts for category expansion or for retention purposes, I think is just a huge margin protection lever that a lot of companies aren't yet fully taking advantage of.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense. Now, Christina had a question for Amanda. Amanda, if you don't mind, I'm going to direct it to you. She's asking about wholesale. So, and actually, I mean, Stephanie, maybe you have an opinion on this too, but we'll start with Amanda. For customers that discover your products through wholesale, how do your retention strategies shift, or do you have a way of even reaching those customers versus ones that are acquired through the D2C site?
So here's what I'll say: the wholesale data ecosystem is one closed system, and it doesn't sync up to our internal systems, and that's by design, right? That's to protect the privacy of the customers, as well as to give each business the ability to manage their own health of customer file, et cetera, et cetera. What I will say is that in a previous life, I actually worked on customer data for a major, very large US wholesaler that sells Kate Spade products and Michael Kors products and all those sorts of things. And what I'll say is that wholesale has similar challenges, right? It's the one and done challenge. It's the opportunity to drive two, and once you get her to that second purchase, she's infinitely more valuable. And so I think that across the board, any customer who is willing to make two purchases from your brand, regardless of where those purchases are made, is absolutely going to be a more valuable customer. Just having seen the data again in the DTC environment and in the wholesale environment, the patterns are exactly the same. So that I would imagine that a crossover customer is as valuable as somebody who has made 2+ purchases within a single channel. And that is in line with everything that we say about omni, right? A customer who's going to shop you online and in store is more valuable. So whereas there's no way that I have seen yet to actually prove that quantifiably, because the data sets are different, based on what I've seen in wholesale and in DTC, I would imagine that, you know, the retention approaches would be consistent and the retention opportunities the same.
I'm just curious, because I saw it recently in one of my purchases. Do you ever do a post-purchase survey, like a really quick survey, like where did you hear from us? Because that's one way to potentially capture that information.
Yeah, for sure. We haven't done one that I can recall in quite some time. Well, no, we do. We have a partner that helps us. I cannot recall that we've asked about wholesale in quite some time, but that's certainly something that could happen.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that, Veronica. We did a customer survey just generally about a handful of different things, and we did break out the segments based on if they were active VIP or churned customers, so that we could separate that data. And one of the questions that we wanted to understand was where else she may be shopping for our brand. And we did get different answers for the different segments. So I feel like just having that snapshot of kind of where our active buyers may also be purchasing in our wholesale partners, and if it's in store, online, or both, was just definitely an interesting kind of ammo for us to have, because we, like Amanda said, it is a black box.
Yeah. I think that survey was so quick when I got it. I was like, oh, this is really easy. I'm happy to provide this information. I was like, so useful. Well, we're all, gosh, so many questions and we're almost out of time. So I'm going to close us out with, just because it's the holidays and I know we're all getting ready for peak, you know, are there any key roles that you're trying to fill? I'm going to start with you, Suruchi, because I know you're recruiting for 2 big positions.
I am. I do want to say it's so unfortunate to see how the recession is starting to impact the job market. You know, lots of news that has hit us last week and just this morning. Thankfully, we are still hiring, and 2 of the key roles I'm trying to fill are my Director of Retention and Loyalty, as well as my Director of Growth and Acquisition, besides some others that are posted on minted.com. So if you know any good people, please send them our way.
Awesome. Anyone else? Calls for new hires?
Nothing at the moment.
All right. Well, everyone can apply for Minted roles. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Amanda, Suruchi, Stephanie, George, thank you for sharing your experiences with our community. It was really great discussion. For the audience that is tuning in, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. We are back on December 7th with our Cyber Week recap, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.